and knowing what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done, is often helpful in this endeavor. So let's start with cleaning. We often hear about how Pesach cleaning is a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous amount of effort. There are stories about, my ancestors in the shtetl in Europe who would sand the floors and sand their tabletops, their wooden tabletops, and repaint everything in their house in honor of Pesach to worry about the chametz. So it's important to remember, it's important to always keep in mind that cleaning for Pesach is not spring cleaning. It's actually, Pesach's very early this year. It starts March 27th. It's way too early for spring cleaning. Spring cleaning is late April, maybe May. And when you got nothing else to do, when you have some time on your hands, that's when you spring clean, right? Pesach prep is not the time for spring cleaning. There's enough work that needs to be done as it is, than to add a layer of unnecessary cleaning to the mix. What's the idea of Pesach cleaning? The idea of Pesach cleaning is to remove chametz from our midst that we may come to eat. After all, we eat chametz 51 weeks a year. There's only 8 days a year that we don't eat chametz. So the purpose of cleaning is to remove any chametz. We'll talk a little bit about chametz later on. Remove chametz from our midst so that we don't come to eat it. Now the rabbis, if you read the Talmud and Pesachim, they're actually learning in Daf Yomi, the rabbis have instituted a number of suggestions and ways to avoid owning chametz on Pesach, which is one of the restrictions. You can't eat it and you can't own it. So what the rabbis said is, what we do? We declare that any chametz that we have is null and void. Right? When we do the bedika, after we search for chametz, we make a bittul. It's a declaration of nullification. And also when we burn our chametz, or this year with slight differences because Erev Pesach is Shabbos. We're not really going to get into that, but that's a whole topic to keep in mind, right? Friday is not Erev Pesach. Right? Friday is Erev Shabbos. And Shabbos is Erev Pesach, right? So we have to keep that in mind. For most purposes, there's no difference. The one place where it does come up has to do with eating chametz after you burn it, right? So you burn it in the morning, but it's only Friday. It's not Erev Pesach, it's Erev Shabbos. So in theory, you could eat chametz on Friday night, Shabbos day. But, if you're going to eat chametz until 11 o'clock or whatever, but how do you go about doing that? And what should your meals be? Your meal should be Pesach-dik, and you still have to make hamotzi. So all that is in the bulletin in a special section we created to go through that. And you can ask Rabbi Freiberg or me if you have questions on that. But so the rabbi said, nullify your chametz, so it no longer is yours, right? Any chametz, we have an institution that the rabbis established because we nullify chametz called selling chametz. We sell our chametz, right? If we have any chametz that we want to, that we hope to use after Pesach, we can put it aside somewhere where we're not going to utilize that area. And on that area, we place all the chametz that we want to sell to the non-Jew, which I can arrange for you. And then after Pesach, hopefully the non-Jew sells it back to us, and we have usage of it. So what do you have to clean? You have to clean big pieces of chametz, right? So if there's a half a piece of bread somewhere in your kitchen on the floor, in between your sofa cushions, those types of that type of bread needs to be removed. Do you have to pull out your refrigerator? Well, do you normally pull out your refrigerator on a Shabbos or weekday? If the answer is no, then you don't really have to pull out your refrigerator in time for Pesach. I do recommend every year or so to pull out your refrigerator to make sure that you don't have anything living behind there, or it's not particularly dirty. But it's not between the fact that you nullify any chametz that you don't plan on eating, coupled with the fact that it's not accessible, right? Since that chametz is not accessible, you really don't have much to worry about. Just don't pull out your refrigerator on Pesach, because if you didn't clean behind there and then you find some bread, then you're gonna have to get rid of it. You have to, burn it or flush it down the toilet. So, the type of cleaning we're talking about is just to remove any large pieces of chametz from our midst. So, yes, is there a spiritual Kabbalistic idea of cleansing ourselves from the chametz? Should we do a little bit more than is absolutely necessary? That's up to you. Yeah, I clean my car before Pesach. It's a nice thing to do, right? I eat in my car on occasion. My kids eat in the car. They're messy. The truth is, they're not going to eat the crumbs that are left after they eat. Occasionally, you'll find like big chunks of sandwich, but that's, so you should look through your car to make sure there's no big chunks of sandwich, so that a child will eat in the back seat. So yeah, there are certain things that we do as part of our ritual, part of our perhaps spiritual, Kabbalistic, metaphysical need to prepare ourselves for Pesach, because it's such a monumental and important holiday on the Jewish calendar. But technically, you don't have to, unless you're worried that you're going to come to eat it, right? So that's really important. Anywhere that you bring chametz into should be checked and cleaned in some way to ensure that there's no chametz there. You should check your backpacks, your kids' backpacks, so that their lunches are not, or make sure that there's no chametz in them. Any room or any location where you don't bring chametz, you don't have to clean, right? So we don't eat in our bedroom, so we don't have to clean it for Pesach because there's no chametz there. It's what the Gemara calls a makom she'ein machlisin bo chametz. You don't bring chametz there. You don't have to clean it for Pesach. You should vacuum it. You should dust it, but it's not a requirement in advance for Pesach. It's just whatever schedule you're on for the purposes of cleaning. When it comes to that's my spiel about cleaning. You really should be able to do an inventory of what needs to be checked, what needs to be looked through in not a lot of time. An hour or so, you should be able to go through what needs to be checked to make sure there's no chametz in it. And whatever you're cleaning you want to do, feel free to do so, but don't call it Pesach prep. Call it spring cleaning, and if you have time for it, do it. If you don't, do it at some other point. Do it at some other point in time. There is a question, and somebody mentioned that it didn't make it into the newest rendition of the bulletin, about what types of chametz are we looking to rid ourselves of. Now, again, as I mentioned at the bottom of the sale of chametz form, one should try their best to consume, get rid of, or donate as much chametz as possible in advance of Pesach. The right thing to do, right? Last year there was a lot of talk about scarcity of product. It's crazy, right? We said people are worried they're not going to be able to get food after Pesach because who knew what the shipping and distribution was going to be like. It's really unbelievable. Fortunately, this Pesach, there's plenty of chametz, there's plenty of Pesach products, there's plenty of toilet paper, there's everything you could possibly need or worry about. We're all set, thankfully. But it is correct not to stock up on chametz before Pesach. So one should consume or get rid of. Right? If you have a stale box of pretzels, now's the time to throw out that stale box of pretzels. If it's half eaten and you like pretzels, now's the time to eat those pretzels. If you bought pretzels and you realize that you're going off carbs, now might be a good time to donate those pretzels to the food bank, right? And there's actually the bat mitzvah class led by my wife and Mrs. Sarah Freiberg is doing a chametz food drive for the cupboard right before Pesach. They'll sell that chametz and make it available to kosher consumers after Pesach. So that's an option. But what types of chametz do we have to rid ourselves of? So this is where it comes into the question about various types of chametz. There's certain things called chametz gamor. Chametz gamor is full chametz, 100% chametz. Then there are things called tarovet chametz. It's a product that has some chametz mixed in. Right, a great example of that is, let's say, a vinegar-based product. Right, something with vinegar in it, maybe ketchup or something like that has chametz vinegar in it. It's not 100% chametz. It's a mixture that contains some chametz in it. Right, so when we talk about ridding our homes of chametz and getting rid of as much as possible chametz, we're talking about chametz gamor. Because other types of chametz, although they're not allowed to be eaten on Pesach, don't get me wrong, and you're not allowed to own them, you are allowed to sell them according to all opinions, right? And I know my predecessor, Rabbi Davis, always quoted the chumrah, the stringency of Rav Soloveitchik, not to sell what's called chametz gamor, not to sell real chametz, right? But only to sell things that are a mixture of chametz. And there are actually lists available online to give you a differentiation between the two, but it's pretty simple. Real chametz are things like bread and pasta and cookies and cake and pretzels and certain cereals, right? Those are things that are real chametz. What are mixtures of chametz? Things that have a combination, right? So like even flour. Flour is not real chametz, right? It's just not kosher for Passover. So you have to sell it with your chametz, but there's no stringency not to have it available. Personally, I do sell real chametz, so it's not so important, and everyone always sells real chametz. The greatest proof is most people have the custom to sell their scotch and their whiskey and their bourbon, which is chametz. So the differentiation between real chametz and chametz mixtures is one to be aware of, but not critically important. Being that if you're going to keep anything of a chametz nature, make sure to effect a sale of chametz form so that can be taken care of you, and so that you don't own any chametz on Pesach. There's a violation of owning chametz, whether it's chametz gamor or a mixture of chametz, whether it's a rabbinic prohibition or a Torah prohibition. Not really that relevant for us. We don't want to violate either one of them, and so it's worthwhile to donate, give away, eat, use, whatever you don't need. If you do need it, and not, some people are in a position that they need to hold on to their chametz for economic reasons or whatever the case may be. And so you can sell real chametz, you can sell mixture of chametz, just make sure to effect a sale of chametz form. That's what I wanted to talk about when it came to cleaning. Right, the cleaning and the prep, and in terms of what's real chametz and chametz gamor as opposed to tarovet chametz. If anyone has any questions about that, I'll pause for a second. Otherwise, we'll move on to the topic of we're here. There's real, as opposed to cleaning, which there really isn't a lot halachically to talk about. There isn't a lot of cleaning that you must do in time for Pesach. When it comes to koshering, if you want to use things appropriately, there are many more things that one must do or should do, assuming they don't have a separate one for Pesach. So
I have a question.
Yes.
There's a certain pickle that I happen to like that they have at Publix. They don't get it in very often, so when they get it in, I buy 2 or 3 containers of these pickled spears. You're talking about vinegar. There's no way I'm going to be able to finish these up before.
Okay.
So I just put them in, leave them in the refrigerator, cover them up, or what?
Yeah, I mean, you can. Again, you would want to do it in such a way. If you're leaving chametz in your refrigerator that you're using over Pesach, you would want to designate a shelf, either on the door or on one shelf that's exclusively chametz, and maybe even put tape a piece of paper that covers that shelf so that you don't forget. But yeah, we've talked about that in the past, that you can leave chametz in a freezer or a refrigerator, demarcating the area as clearly as possible. If it could be a full shelf, that would be best. Put it in a bag, label it chametz, in some way or another, make it clear that that's the case.
Thank you.
Sure.
I know
it. Someone asked about soy sauce. Soy sauce would not be chametz gamor. It's hard to imagine that soy sauce is. Again, when you ask, do you have to get rid of it? You don't have to get rid of anything. If you are being careful to get rid of chametz gamor, I don't think I think soy sauce would not be chametz gamor. Cake mixes might be. Cake mixes might be because they're not just flour. They are cake mix. I would have to. We will add to the links on our on the page a chart from the Star K that goes through what's chametz gamor. Cake mixes might be chametz gamor. If you don't want to hold on to chametz gamor, you would According to the OU, soy is chametz gamor. Soybeans are chametz gamor. That's an interesting. That's hard to maybe the way that they're processed. That I do not know. Yeast is not chametz gamor. That I remember. Baker's yeast, I think, is chametz gamor. Okay. Well, okay, this is also relevant for this topic. Leftover fruits and vegetables that you have in your refrigerator. Someone mentioned that in the soy sauce there's wheat in the vinegar. I'm not sure that would make it definitely chametz. You can't use it. But how much? What's the percentage? It sounds like it's a tarovis to me. It's probably a tarovis chametz. Again, can't use it, you can't own it, you can't eat it. But if you're machmir not to sell chametz gamor, I'm not sure that would be the case. Can you leave over? What about vegetables? You bought vegetables before Pesach. You have onions now. Can you use them? So any raw as we know, I mean, we didn't talk about products, but as we know, raw vegetables, unless they're kitniot, are not problematic for anyone to eat. So, you have a melon that you buy 2 weeks before Pesach and you thought you were going to eat it and you don't eat it, right? So you can eat it, you can use it on Pesach. Onions, as long as the onions are kept in a place where the chametz doesn't come into contact with the onions, right? You keep your onions in your pantry, keep your onions in your fridge, and there's no concern that they were somehow contaminated with chametz. There should not be an issue. The only issue would be if somehow part of a package of produce was used. That's a tongue twister. Part of a package of produce was used in context of a chametz dish, and maybe you put your chametz hands in and access those vegetables. But otherwise, and even in that case, if they peel and if you wash them, there shouldn't be a problem. So produce that's left over shouldn't be does not seem to pose any issue. You should be able to use that. You don't have to leave it till after Pesach to use. Let's talk about koshering now. Good timing. So obviously, when it comes to unless we have a separate Pesach kitchen, right, we're going to have to kosher certain appliances in order to use them for Pesach. So let's first talk about appliances. Then we can talk a little bit about utensils. Most people have a lot of utensils that are designated just for Pesach, so it's less urgent. We are still exploring what possibilities there may be for a communal koshering pot of some sort, so people can get some of their koshering done in a central location. Still, details have not been set, so I can't confirm that that's going to happen. But lots of people learned how to kosher themselves at home last year. So even if they don't like doing it, we know how to do it in a way that we may not have known before last year. When it comes to appliances, let's start with the appliances that don't need koshering. And somebody mentioned the refrigerator. The refrigerator and freezer do not need to be koshered. Some people have the custom to line the refrigerator or the freezer, so obligation to do so. Everything that's put in the refrigerator or freezer, by definition, is cold, and therefore there would be there should be no issue. There's no just cleaning it to make sure that there's no chametz visible would suffice when it comes to the refrigerator and the freezer. We've talked about it in the past, and as we know, there's lots of lists that can help with this. By the way, let's take a moment, and this will be this is already in the bulletin for Pesach. The CRC, Chicago Rabbinical Council, puts out a very extensive Pesach bulletin. The oupassover.org website is tremendously helpful. The Star K has a number of lists that are really, really helpful, and some of them that we access, including what's chametz gamor, including their pet food list, which is always helpful for people who have pets, and a number of other basic information. These are great resources that I would encourage you to take a look at. Not necessarily because I don't always appreciate being asked, which parchment paper does the OU allow, when if you have an OU guide, that information is available to you as well. But it's also, knowledge is power. So if the more you can access for yourself, the better prepared you can be. Occasionally, there'll be a difference of opinion between various kosher agencies, at which time I'm happy to tell you what my opinion is and what our practice, what our minhag is locally. So you have, when it koshering, so you don't have to kosher a refrigerator or a freezer. You do have to kosher a sink, right? We've talked about how to kosher a sink. So you can only kosher a sink that's made out of metal. If you have an enamel sink, if you have a porcelain sink, it's not able to be koshered, but that's okay. You can just use a basin insert, a basin or an insert in the sink, and you are all set. To kosher a sink, we know that the way that you kosher a sink is the way that the chametz became accessed into that item. So how does chametz come into a sink? You pour your pasta water down the drain, and the pasta water gets all over the place. So it's hot water that's dripped. You've had sauce, whatever, you dump down your sink. So you then have to kosher it through hot water that's poured all over the surfaces. One requirement in general when koshering with most methods is that you need to wait 24 hours from the last time it was used for hot. Right? So you could use your sink for cold within the 24 hours, but you can't use your sink for hot. I always think about it. We always kosher Saturday night or Sunday because you haven't used your sink for hot over Shabbos, right? There's lots of things that are easy for that. So if you wash your hands for hamotzi in your sink over Shabbos, that's not a problem. You just can't use it for hot within 24 hours, and then you boil up water and you pour it all over the surfaces of the sink, and the sink is then koshered. It's also recommended to turn on the cold water afterwards, just to rinse everything down. Countertops. Many people kosher their countertops. You can also cover your countertops for Pesach, but if you don't want to cover them with foil or with some sort of covering, you can kosher them. Most countertop materials can be koshered, and the CRC has a great list in their bulletin about all the different types that can be koshered. And there too, just as the transfer may have been due to a splash on the counter, so you kosher it by pouring boiling water. There's some questions about whether there's a question sometimes asked about steamers. My understanding, based on the kosher agencies, is that steamers, in theory, would be an effective method for koshering, but practically most of the steamers, the consumer steamers, don't reach the threshold whereby when the water would come out of the steamer and hit the countertop, would it suffice? If you have one that does do the trick, then it would be then it would be fine. But generally, the kosher agencies are a little bit reticent to across the board any type of steamer. Also, remember that any countertops that you're not using for hot on Pesach don't need to be kosher, right? Let's say you were always going to use a trivet on your Pesach on your counter, right? You weren't going to put any hot pots directly on your counter. For Pesach, you're going to put it on a trivet. So then you wouldn't have to kosher your counters, right? Not everyone has to kosher their counters. It depends on how they like to use their kitchen. And you don't have to kosher all your counters. There's no problem with your counters not being koshered for Pesach. It's only a problem if you want to use that counter for a Pesach purpose, right? So like you can use, if you have a big kitchen and you're doing a little bit of cooking and you want one counter that's kosher for Pesach, so kosher one counter. You don't have to kosher the whole thing. There's nothing inherently wrong if you have unkoshered counters for Pesach. The only issue would be is when you put your hot Pesach pot down, you want to put it down in an appropriately kosher for Passover setting. Other things that have to be koshered is the stovetop and the oven. We've talked about this in the past, but it's always good to be reminded. The grates on a stovetop are koshered by turning them up to their highest setting for about 5 or 10 minutes until they're glowing red hot, and then they are koshered. The oven is the areas in between the burners. Right? The areas in between the burners, generally we recommend that you cover in some way, or ensure that you're not going to access those areas with anything hot at all. So, in the old school with the electric coils, we would foil the areas in between, turn on the burners of the electric burners for 5 or 10 minutes, and be done with it. With a glass top, we've talked about this in the past. The glass top, it's not recommended to foil the areas in between. So really, the recommendation is just to not use the areas in between. Just don't put anything hot in the areas in between on your glass. Additionally, what we have adopted is to avoid any questions. Let's say a pot extends beyond the burner onto the glass. So our recommendation is to kosher it in a way that's not ideal, but is acceptable according to some opinions, and that is by pouring boiling water over the areas in between the burners. Right, so you kosher the burners on a glass top the way you kosher all burners, 5 or 10 minutes on high. And my recommendation, and I think the recommendation is always not to turn on all 4 burners at once on high for 5 or 10 minutes. It could crack, to get too hot. So you do 1 or 2 burners at a time, and then pour boiling water on after it cools down, pour boiling water on the areas in between. When it comes to, and I think this was a little bit, actually this is related to a question that was asked. That was one point of unclarity in the bulletin. What type of pot do you use when you're koshering, let's say, your sink? So you can, again, just remember sort of the order of operations. If you koshered your burner, then you can use a Pesach pot, a Pesach kettle, to kosher then your sink or your countertops. If you have not koshered your burners yet, you could also use a chametz one, so long as it has not been used within the last 24 hours. This came up when it came to koshering utensils. There was a little bit of a typo in the announcement. How to kosher. Let's say you have kiddush cups. What do you kosher your kiddush cups for Pesach? What type of pot do you use to kosher your kiddush cups? So it's a bit of a typo, but you can really use either type of pot. You either use a Pesach pot, or you can use a chametz pot that hasn't been used in 24 hours. There's a chumrah that the OU mentions that before you use a chametz pot, even if it hasn't been used in 24 hours, some people have the custom to boil it with water and then dump that water out and then boil it again and then kosher your pots. Kosher, let's say, your kiddush cups. I don't think it's necessary, but it's an interesting chumrah, and not surprising. There's lots of chumras associated with Pesach. Not all of them crazy. Some of them crazier than others, and some of them that have some that make more sense. So the short answer is you can use either chametz pot or a Pesach pot. Just remember, whatever you're using, your burner should correspond to, right? So if you're using a chametz pot, your burner should still be chametz. If you're using a Pesach pot, your burner should be Pesach already, and then you pour the water in on the sink and countertops, and we talked about on a glass top in between the areas on the stove. I still recommend, though, that you don't use the glass top to place hot pots on in between the burners. Right? Take it off, put it on your kosher for Pesach counter or on a trivet or something like that, especially on Pesach. Couple of other items that the oven, right? So this is where the difference between a self-clean oven and a non-self-clean oven. Certainly with a self-clean, both of them, you need to put on the highest setting. A non-self-clean oven, the highest setting is usually like 550 or something like that. Self-clean oven, the highest setting is self-clean. The major difference between the two is whether you have to wait 24 hours since the last time you used it. This already can be tricky if you use your oven on Shabbos, right, in some way, Friday night or whatever. If you use your oven Friday night, or even if you leave stuff in, we talked about that in my last year. You could theoretically use an oven in some way or another throughout Shabbos. Check my other share for details. So if you're using a non-self-clean oven, it can't have been used in the last 24 hours. If you're self-cleaning your oven, you don't have to wait, because self-clean is like nuclear reactor hot. It's like Libun Gomor, right? It's the highest type of koshering you can do. And one of the things that when you do the Libun Gomor is that you don't have to wait 24 hours before koshering in that case. So that's the difference between an oven, a self-clean oven, and an oven. And either case, if it's a self-clean, you can put it on the shortest self-clean cycle. If it's a non-self-clean, you should leave it on its highest setting for about 24 hours, about 1.5 to 2 hours. And then, of course, in both cases, but especially if it's not self-clean, the oven needs to be cleaned pretty well. You should make sure that things are cleaned off before you kosher it. When you self-clean, it's just a good recommendation. It's a manufacturing recommendation that it be cleaned out. And also, you don't want it to smoke and give you sit off your fire alarm. So you want to clean it out somewhat, but practically anything that's in there is ash, and it's completely koshered according to all opinions. Warming drawers, we've talked about that in the past. Warming drawers, some say you can't kosher them. I like the way the CRC says it, is with a sterno can. You light a sterno can that lasts for about an hour and a half. Put it in the warming drawer. Leave it open a little bit, otherwise there won't be any oxygen, and that'll heat up the warming drawer to a temperature above what it's normally at. The warming drawer also should not be used within the 24 hours because you're not doing Libun Gomor before, so it should have not been used for 24 hours before you kosher it. A plata, a plug-in Shabbos hot plate. The recommendation is to clean it well, to turn it on its highest setting, or turn it on at whatever setting for about an hour, and then cover it with heavy-duty aluminum foil if you're going to use the same one. People ask me about barbecue grills. I often say that it's not particularly easy. One of the prerequisites for most types of koshering is that it has to be clean, and a barbecue grill is very hard to clean, but it is possible. The Star K put out a series of videos about koshering various items. And one of the videos they did was about koshering a barbecue grill. Like if you go on vacation and you're at an Airbnb, and they have a treif grill, how would you go about koshering it? And I got a hold of it because it's the rabbi who's doing the koshering is my second cousin, Rabbi Tzvi Holland. So we have a family relationship there, and he does a good one. So if you want to attempt koshering a barbecue grill for Pesach, I'll be happy to send you the link. In my experience, it's not worth it. But buy yourself a hibachi and be done with it and call it a day. But if you're interested, I'll be happy to send you that video. Hot water dispenser. So a hot water dispenser, like a water urn, that's been used just for water, that has not been brought to the table, that has not been descaled or cleaned with chametz vinegar, can be used for Pesach just by wiping the. If you're worried that you made instant soup and you turned on the spigot and the water and the steam came up from the noodles onto the spigot, you can pour some of your kettle water on the spigot and remove any of those concerns that you might have. But practically speaking, that's not really an issue. But if you're the only thing that might or could be koshered. And they talk about that too with cold water dispensers, right? If you have a cold water dispenser with a hot water spout and you want to splash boiling water just on the spout, you could do that. But basically, you would be able to use the same hot water pot for Pesach, so long as you haven't cleaned it with a chametz sponge, you haven't descaled it with vinegar, that's chametz dik, you haven't brought it to the table. Those types of things would make it problematic. One other thing they mentioned, but I don't think it's practical. So they say you may not use it for Pesach if you warmed challahs on the top of your hot water heater to a level that would be hotter than Yad Soledes. So I don't know if that, I mean, I know I've taken the chill out of things on top of my hot water heater, hot water urn, but I don't remember. I usually use my crock pot. So if you have done that, talk to me before using it for Pesach. But otherwise, there doesn't seem to be an issue. Some things that can't be koshered that are sort of, become more popular lately include an Instapot, a standalone air fryer, a toaster oven cannot really be koshered for Pesach. These are some of the things, and that has to do with the size and the inability for it to vent appropriately, and the temperature that it gets to. So those are some of the things that we wouldn't kosher for Pesach. Any questions on appliances? And then we'll move on to just some items. Okay.
Rabbi.
Yes. Yeah, you go ahead, please.
Oh, question about a NutriBullet. Can you
NutriBullet.
just, yeah, for smoothies. Can we, is it possible just buy a new container, like a new?
So what, it's a plastic container with a metal.
The NutriBullet itself is a metal blade.
Right.
And the container is plastic.
Right.
So
So I guess the problem, do you use it with chametz, or do you just wash it with a chametz?
we use it with fruit, like frozen fruit or fresh fruit.
Right. So that's right. So that's fine. We'll get to that later, but frozen fruit doesn't pose a Pesach issue.
And we wash it with our regular,
You wash with your regular sponge. So it's
sponges
can you kosher that piece?
No, I'd have to buy a new piece. That piece I'd have to buy a separate piece. It's sort of like the Soda Stream where you'd buy a plastic, like you buy the new bottles. I think it's like that. I'd have to buy a, but I'm wondering.
And the motor's attached to the blade?
No.
Steve.
Separate?
The blade comes out.
The blade comes out.
So I would kosher the blade and then buy a new thing and you're all set.
Okay.
I think so, sure.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, especially since we'll get to the products, but the items that you're using in it don't seem to pose any Pesach, particularly Pesach.
No, definitely not. No.
So so I would because you wash it with a chametz sponge out of abundance of caution, as we are on Pesach, I would kosher that little piece and buy a new container, like you said, and you're good to go.
Thank you.
We generally contrast that, let's say, to a KitchenAid. People who use KitchenAids for their dough, it's recommended not to kosher them for Pesach. Might it be possible in an ideal world? Maybe, if you have extenuating circumstances, we could talk about it. But, that's the polar opposite, where there's a lot of crevices and pieces and you're dealing directly with chametz ingredients. And therefore, we're a little bit more reluctant to allow those types of things to be koshered for Pesach. When it comes to koshering items, we talked about metal items that come into contact with liquids, right? Or metal items that come into contact with a chametz sponge. That's the only thing that they come into contact with. That might be chametz, or pots that are coming to liquid with chametz, not kosher for Pesach, or let's say not kosher for Pesach, are kosher through water, right? So they're immersed in a pot of boiling water. and the item utensil itself should not have been used within the last 24 hours, right? So this is the koshering method for, saucepans and soup pots and silverware and knives for the most part. All of these things are kosher through what's called hagala. You get a pot boiling, and again, we said that pot could either be a chametz pot that was unused for 24 hours or a Pesach pot. Just make sure your burner is corresponding to the right one. And it boils, you drop things in, you take them out, you rinse them off under cold water, and then they are koshered for Pesach. Many people, at home, even if there's not a lot to kosher, many people will kosher Kiddush cups this way. You can kosher silverware this way, and the benefit. And when you kosher for Pesach, you can always it's your opportunity to switch things from milchiks to fleishiks also. We generally don't kosher from milchiks to fleishiks, but if you kosher for Pesach, you can then designate it for the other one that you didn't do before. Noah, I see you there.
Hi, Rabbi. How are you?
Good, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I got a quick question. I'm using a stainless steel teapot for boiling water to kosher my stove and my sink and stuff like that. Do I need to boil that teapot first?
So does the teapot need to be koshered? So, again, that would be similar to the blade and the bullet. If you don't expose it to anything chametz, including a chametz sponge, then you wouldn't need to kosher it. You wouldn't need to
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. And then the other way to kosher things, in addition to boiling water, is dry heat, right? And that's a little bit more difficult in the kitchen, right? So a baking sheet or something that did not come into contact with liquid can only be koshered through dry heat, high temperatures, blowtorch, self-clean mode of the oven. The in-between case is a frying pan. Frying pan that's used with copious amounts of oil can be koshered through hagala, through dipping it in boiling water. If it's only used with spray or without any, with not a lot of oil, then we would consider it more like a requiring libun of some sort, and it becomes more complicated. If you have questions about your particular case, you can ask me. Another issue when it comes to koshering is we don't kosher things with big crevices or big scratches in it. So if you have a knife with a big crevice in it, like the handle and the blade are separated, we're a little bit more reluctant and reticent to kosher those types of things. But a knife, even with a wooden handle, if it's basically one piece and there's no crevice in between, a sturdy knife would be permissible to kosher via hagala, boiling water.
Rabbi, I have
any
a couple
questions on
questions.
items? Go ahead.
The first is, in terms of the granite, if I polish my granite, what do I do first? Polish and then kosher, or kosher and then polish?
I think you should polishing. That's not sealing, right? That's just polishing.
I think it's sealing. I mean sealing, whatever that
Sealing?
product is.
Yeah, so if it's sealing, I think you seal and then kosher. If it was just polishing, you could do either one, right? I think it's sealing.
Okay, so seal and then kosher.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the other thing with the water urn, I think using a water urn for koshering, the water is not hot enough. Is that correct?
Water in an urn.
If it was hot enough, we won't be able to drink it, I imagine.
I guess not. Okay.
I just wanted to know for
That
sure.
sounds right.
Okay.
That sounds right.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna mount the products. Make sure you buy products that are kosher for Passover, right? Make sure it has a P on it. Just a couple of things. Not only will things say P on them, like for instance, the OU. I just went to Winn-Dixie today, just a little bit of market research. I noticed that, it'll say OU, and then in really little letters underneath, it'll say kosher for Passover. Right, so either make sure you bring your reading glasses or whatever the case may be. Just because it doesn't have a P next to it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not kosher for Passover. And of course, as it's mentioned in the bulletin and elsewhere, right, things that we would expect all of it to be Pesach-dik, like Manischewitz wine, it's not all kosher for Pesach. Some of it has corn syrup in it. Not all matzah is kosher for Pesach, right? So buyer beware, check all the products. Even when you're in the Winn-Dixie Passover section up front, make sure you check the products. Even if you're in one of our kosher stores, check to make sure that it's supposed to be Pesach-dik, but always check. They do, if you're at a kosher store and you find a chametz product in the Pesach section, tell the mashgiach. If you're at Winn-Dixie, there's no one to tell. I mean, you can tell them, but I don't know if they care. And they certainly don't convey as being, everything according to the strict letter of the law. What I noticed is that there's a number of Pesach products this year that are under reliable hashgachas that are kitniyot. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of rice cakes available at Winn-Dixie under hashgacha that are la'ochle kitniyot. And those of us Ashkenazim who don't eat kitniyot just need to be aware of both, that they are, if you see people eating them on Pesach, there are many that are under reliable hashgachas that are kitniyot. And if you don't eat kitniyot, just to be aware of it. And so one product, it was a pesto product, that it was a star K, and then the label on it said from Israel, kosher la'ochle kitniyot. I'm not 100% sure how that works, but what's clear is that the star K does not certify this product for Pesach. Someone else may certify it for Pesach, and therefore we just have to keep an eye out on those items. The OU has a list. It's a great list of things that don't require a P in order to use them. Some of them are things that we hear about a lot, right? In past years, we've talked about real lemon juice, real lime juice. We've talked about, there's a long list now of virgin coconut oil that doesn't require a P. There's one or two between the Star K and the OU. They have a list of avocado oils that don't require a P. We always know that extra virgin olive oil doesn't require a P, as long as it's not, light or, flavored or anything like that. Just plain extra virgin olive oil doesn't require kosher for Passover. And the OU has a great list. And it also has on the website is even better, because you can just punch in a word and it'll tell you which ones are under the OU and which ones have OUP and which ones don't require a Pesach certification. So for instance, I punched in raisins and I saw that Publix raisins and Winn-Dixie SE Grocer raisins and Trader Joe raisins, as long as they don't have oil in their ingredients, are kosher for Pesach just with a plain OU. So it's very useful. The tools, especially the internet tools, the OU and especially is a very useful tool to have. The OU finally came around to something that the Star K has been saying for a while. Now the OU came around to it, and when it comes to seltzer, any unflavored seltzer without any other additives can be used for Pesach, right? So plain seltzer, Canada Dry seltzer, without any additives, not the flavored seltzer, but plain seltzer can be bought, whether it is in a bottle or a can. Plain seltzer can be purchased just within a hashgacha. A P is not necessary. Bag salads. Sometimes we're able to get bag salads with a P on it. The CRC points out that if it's a bag salad where there's no kitniyot or chametz sensitive ingredients, right? No snap peas, no croutons, nothing like that. As long as you buy it before Pesach, there shouldn't be a problem. As we've discussed in the past, they talked about how to keep it fresh, some of these bag salads have a very minute amount of citric acid in them, but it is such a minute amount that it is bottle, according to all opinions, it's like 1 part per 100,000 or something. It's a really very small, minute amount. And therefore, bag salads, again, putting aside the bug issue, right? We're just talking from a Pesach issue, putting aside the bug issue from a Pesach issue, buy it before Pesach, and you're fine. A similar discussion comes up with frozen fruit. Frozen fruit, as opposed to frozen vegetables, which do require a P, even from the kosher brands, is my understanding. And so bodek, frozen vegetables, need a P to use them on Pesach. But frozen fruit is different. Any frozen fruit that's raw, that's plain fruit, whole or sliced or melon balls, any type of frozen fruit, so long as it doesn't have any additives, or so long as the only additive listed in the ingredients is sugar, is permissible to use even without a P. The caveat there also being that there are different rules as it relates to bug issues, right? Certain berries have a bug issue, and it may depend on if there's hashgacha on the berries, frozen berries, then you can use them. If it doesn't have hashgacha, then you may be only allowed to use them in smoothies, right? Blend them up, and then it becomes okay. But I just want to focus on the Pesach issue. I'm happy to follow up on the bug issue at a different time. All frozen fruit of all types is permitted without a P, and really permitted without hashgacha for that matter. The only difference being perhaps as it relates to the potential bug issue with some fruit. Another area that comes up is coffee. Many of the K-cups don't need a P as long as they're plain, unflavored, and not decaffeinated. We didn't talk about how you kosher a Keurig. A Keurig can be koshered by running it through with hot water once, and then pouring boiling water on some of the pieces. Like the needle that pokes a hole. Splash some boiling water on those areas. But many of the K-cups are available without a P. I think Nespresso is the same way. The unflavored and the caffeinated is okay. And there's a lot of these products. If you check the OU or the Star K or the CRC, go through them. Nuts is something we always talk about, and we note that as long as they are raw, whole, or pieces, don't have any additives, including BHT or BTA. Are permitted even without a P. As long as they don't have salt on them, as long as they're not roasted, they can be used, with the exception being midget pecans and pecan pieces, I think are the two restrictions, the two exceptions. The same is not said about flour, right? So almond flour, I believe, should have a Pesach certification because it looks like all types of flour. There's a question here about frozen rhubarb. I think frozen rhubarb needs hashgacha. I thought frozen rhubarb needs hashgacha because it's a vegetable. But yeah. So I think frozen rhubarb would require a Pesach certification. Can you buy bagged salad greens during Chol HaMoed? So it seems like the recommendation is to buy it on Pesach. Certainly, if they have a P on them, obviously you can buy them on Chol HaMoed. I think we should avoid buying them on Pesach if they're bagged. You should buy them before Pesach. Noah, did you have a question?
Yes, why is it that we buy the bag before Pesach? If it's a wash and bug check, why does the difference?
No, so what we said, we were talking about those that are not under supervision. So they haven't been checked in advance. And the issue is that there's a spray on it that could be derived from kitniot, maybe derived even from chametz, but is a very, very tiny amount. if we have it in our possession prior to Pesach, we don't have to concern ourselves with it, as opposed to acquiring it on Pesach perhaps poses an issue. So just to be clear, we're talking about bag salad that doesn't have a P designation on it. If it has a P designation on it, you're good. You don't have to worry about it. It's similar to the conversations we have about milk without a P designation on it. Milk without a P designation on it, maybe some vitamins that are in the milk that are of kitniot or even chametz derivation, but they're of such small amounts, they're minute amounts, they are nullified in advance of Pesach. But there's a rule that nullification of chametz only occurs before Pesach and not on Pesach. This is
I
something
see.
that we've talked about in the past, but worth noting. If I make, this has come up. I made chicken soup before Pesach, and I used chicken soup powder that's not kosher for Pesach, right? So as long as the amount of the chicken base is less than 1/60th of the entire pot, then chametz is batel before Pesach. It's
Right.
nullified 1/60. On
Okay.
Pesach itself, it's not nullified at all. Right? So the
Thank you.
same question that emerges, I made a recipe with a little bit of chametz on it. If it was done before Pesach, the 1/60 ratio would apply, and you would be okay to eat even on Pesach. But if it would happen on Pesach, then you'd have a problem.
Gotcha.
Right?
Thank you.
So
All right.
that's why if it's not certified P, we want you to purchase, let's say, the milk. We want you to purchase the bag salad in advance of Pesach. We would discourage you from buying it on Pesach unless it has a P.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Um,
Cool. All
In
right.
terms of the milks, milk is one of those things that will require an update. We'll put that on the Pesach page, yh.org/holidays, and we will get that information as soon as I have it. Usually the ORB is able to give me some of that information. Star K is able to give me some of that information. They've already noted that CRC products, dairy products that are kosher for Pesach will, in the inkjet, it won't say P on the CRC. Let's see, some of the Trader Joe's dairy products are under the CRC. It won't say CRCP. What it'll say is on the inkjet, on the use by date, best date by, it'll have a number -P. So look for the P up there by the inkjet, not on the symbol. And that's true about milks as well. The star DP is often on the inkjet. It's not on the, it's not on the label where the regular hashgacha can be found. When it comes similar to bag salad, I would say something similar about all frozen fish. The OU actually has a longer list of frozen fish that is permissible without a P than it has in a long time. And for years, we've been saying that frozen fish really poses no kashrut Pesach, uniquely Pesach issue, except for the glaze that's on the fish, which may have a kitniot derived basis. And for that, if you rinse off the fish before you use it, that should suffice. That should suffice. Similarly, just buying fish in general, right? We are fortunate to have a number of kosher fish stores, and I certainly recommend that we patronize our kosher establishments. And in such establishments, there's no concern whatsoever. However, we have talked about the possibility of purchasing fish in other settings, especially the salmon situation, because it's the one fish that you can buy even skinned and filleted without any issue, as opposed to all the other white fishes, which is more of a problem. So that setup poses no particular chametz issue, right? It's the issue. It's the issue that we've had that you have in general about purchasing salmon or fish in a non-kosher setting, but there's nothing uniquely Pesach about that scenario. Right? So clean knife, ensure that it's a kosher species. All those things apply, but nothing uniquely Pesach related. milk should be purchased. Milk should either be purchased kosher for Pesach, or if it's not kosher for Pesach, it should be purchased in advance of Pesach. Eggs. There's a custom to buy to not buy eggs that were laid on Pesach. Chances are that the eggs you buy Chol Hamoed Pesach were not laid on Pesach. So that stringency does not technically apply. However, the custom exists to buy as many eggs as possible in advance of Pesach, and not to buy eggs that were laid on Pesach. I think that's about all I wanted to. Those are my prepared remarks for this evening. If anyone has any other questions or comments, happy to take from the floor. You can unmute yourself or put it in the chat. I'm happy to take a look there. But otherwise, I hope we reviewed the salient points so that Pesach preparation can be an elevated experience. You know, what's interesting, one last point, because it's unique, but I think it may be something that reflects on hopefully our entire Pesach preparation. Erev Pesach is the busiest day of the year. There's no busier day than Erev Pesach, except this year, right? Because Erev Pesach this year is Shabbos. So Erev Shabbos is going to be the busiest day of the year, no doubt about it. Erev Shabbos is going to be crazy busy. But once Shabbos starts, that's it. What's done is done, and what's not done is not getting done. You know, and it's a wonderful thing. I even mentioned in the bulletin that this year, right? Everyone should be relaxed going into the Seder. Right? Everyone should be relaxed going into the Seder. You can't take a nap and say it's for Pesach, but you can take a nap and say it's for Shabbos. Right? You should go into the Seder relaxed. And maybe this is the year, because of the year that we've had, that should influence and inspire all of our Pesach preparations. We should do what we need to do. We should do it in a way with a sense of purpose. We shouldn't feel the bondage of Pesach cleaning and Pesach preparation. It should be an elevating experience, one that is in consonance with the mood of gratitude and optimism that is the holiday of Pesach. And hopefully, by reviewing these items and by reminding ourselves of them, we could have a very sweet and kosher Pesach. I saw that there was a couple more questions.
Rabbi.
For almond milk, yeah, there's kosher Pesach almond milk. The only time there are a couple of milks that don't pose any. Milk substitutes need to be kosher Pesach. If somebody needs a particular milk substitute for medical purposes, then the OU has a list of those that don't pose any chametz issues, and you can look that up. But in general, for our basic recipes, we do have to use almond milk that's certified kosher Pesach. Good point. Those that sold their Pesach utensils last year in lieu of toveling them should really tovel them. You've probably been getting emails or texts about the status of your items, whether they've been resold back to you. And if they have been, before you're using them, you really should come to the dish mikvah. We make sure to keep it real full this time of year because we know it's going to be busy, and it's open. And you should tovel those dishes, those utensils this year before using them.
Rabbi, what's the latest Friday to burn chametz? What's the
chametz should be burned the same time as it would be on a regular year. So that's 12:20 something.
Okay.
12:24. So yeah, the unique thing is that, and basically I'll share it with you now, but it's something that I'll share with the congregation. You know, you may have chametz. You know, you could, from that point forward, you could be chametz free, right? So the rest of Friday afternoon, you'll eat kosher for Pesach. On Shabbos, you'll use egg matzah for your lechem mishnah, and all your meals on Shabbos, Friday night, Saturday morning will be kosher for Passover. You could also eat chametz, and the question is, how do you do that if you've burned your chametz, right? Because Erev Pesach is not till Saturday. So really, the recommendation is that any chametz that you'll be using either Friday or Saturday morning, not past 11:23, you should have a box where you keep it separate from the chametz that you're selling. And one of the things that I'm going to go through with the non-Jew, I'm selling our chametz on Friday, like we always do before the time of biur chametz. But I'll note that there are many Jews who have a box of things that they plan on eating over Pesach, over Friday and Saturday, that they're not including in the sale, and I'm not including that in the sale. So if you have, little challah rolls for Shabbos, you should put them in a place distinct from the chametz that you are selling through me, and that chametz will be designated as Friday and Saturday chametz. And then if there's any crumbs of that, that should be flushed down the toilet or whatever. I saw that there are 2 hands raised. Why don't you just?
Yeah. Can you eat in a restaurant, let's say Friday afternoon, Friday lunch, whatever, that chametz after you burn them?
Yeah, so I think so. I don't know yet what the ORB policy is. I imagine they're going to be open because they're going to do a
Restaurant that will be closed for Pesach, I'm assuming so.
Many of them will be closed for Pesach. I don't know if the ORB is allowing it. I imagine they will. And the answer is yes. That chametz that you purchase after
Not here.
the time that chametz is certainly not included in your sale. So you could eat chametz at that point.
Okay.
Just
Rabbi?
put whatever you plan on selling, put aside, and don't access that chametz after Friday at noon. And whatever other chametz you want to eat on Friday afternoon, Friday night, Saturday morning, put it in a separate location, and that's the way we're gonna distinguish them.
Rabbi,
Yes.
what if you have extra chametz after you eat lunch? Like, let's say you have 2 rolls. and
Right. So
what do
the
you do
idea
with
is
that
to
extra
use
bread?
only set aside chametz that you're going to finish, and really just be really tight on it. But any crumbs you have, you should flush down the toilet.
The toilet.
Right? You shouldn't don't leave too much, but whatever's left, flush down the toilet. And at that point, before stop eating chametz 11:20, make sure you flush your chametz at 12:20 or whatever the case is. And at that point you make the bittul. That's sort of the operating procedure for this year. That's what it's going to look like. But yeah, don't save too much chametz. If you thought you were going to eat something on Friday and you don't end up eating it, try to find a dumpster and dump it there. But really try to minimize the amount of chametz that you're going to have available to you after you sell all your chametz through me, which is going to take place, the regular time on Friday, around noontime. Noah.
I'm sorry, I got lots of questions.
No problem.
So I'm assuming that most people will be eating challah on Friday evening for Shabbat. So
Lots of people if you read Rabbi Freiberg's article, lots of people are going to use egg matzah.
haven't
That's
got there
one way
yet.
to avoid.
Okay.
But if you're using challah, you'll use challah, but just, use a little bit of challah, right?
Less.
Or,
Okay.
and eat, we're gonna probably use challah. We're gonna eat hamotzi out on the porch. We'll make kiddush and hamotzi out on the porch. We'll eat our Pesach meal inside, and then we'll bench inside, but we can see where we started our meal.
Nice.
Somebody asked about toothpaste, mouthwash, lipstick. Yes, so those are the only things we in general, medications are not things that we worry about, whether they are chametz or kitniot. Supplements we do, right? Vitamins and supplements, anything that you ingest, if they're vitamins and supplements, those are things that should be chametz free. Kitniot is probably okay if you're ingesting it, if you're just swallowing it. But if you can't determine whether or not a supplement or a vitamin is chametz free, you should probably, if possible, avoid taking that supplement for 8 days, unless you can confirm that it's chametz free. Other types of medication you can take without really any issue. There are certain medications. The only thing some people worry about are things that things with flavor, things that you chew, and things that go in your mouth, right? So chewables and mouthwash and toothpaste. We're going to have a list of that. Most toothpastes between Rabbi Bess's list from that's also part of the Star K book, and Rabbi Blumenkrantz's list that's also available. Between the two of them, most readily available types of toothpaste and mouthwash are viewed as chametz free and are usable. We'll compile that list to make sure that the one you have is on it. And if not, it's not going to be exhaustive. So if you have a question, you can reach out to Rabbi Freiberg or myself, and we can confirm for you. But lipstick may not be pose as much of an issue as a toothpaste and mouthwash. Much more, they say like chapstick. Chapstick doesn't really pose an issue. Lipstick probably does not pose an issue. You don't really eat it. It doesn't really go in your mouth. You don't really eat toothpaste either, or mouthwash, but lipstick doesn't even really go in your mouth. Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, we will, if anyone has a question, just unmute themselves. Otherwise, I'll hang out for another minute or two. But just wishing everyone a sweet and kosher Pesach, and maybe the hallmark of just as Pesach was the time of redemption and salvation, so too should we feel that in our day in terms of the light at the end of the tunnel of this past year of pandemic. So it should add a layer of celebration to our upcoming Pesach.
Thank you, Rabbi. That was good.
All right, you're
Thank you.
welcome. Have a great
Thank you,
night.
Rabbi. Thank you.
This has been